Hey everybody, and welcome back to Art a la Carte. In the last year, one thing I have gotten into as more of a hobby is gardening. Those of you who follow me on social media saw my progress trying to keep my outside garden alive. And for the most part, my outside garden and flowers are doing fabulous. Inside, not so much. A little while ago, I decided to jump down the rabbit hole and buy my first succulent flower, which, she's so beautiful. Succulents are great, especially for those of you like me who have a hard time keeping plants alive. I've only had this succulent for a couple of weeks, but let me show you my progress. So instead of showing you how I take care of living plants, I'm going to show you how to make paper ones.
Art of the Carte's gonna teach us something new, or maybe not so new.
To make paper flowers, you're going to need some paper. For this project, I'm using kind of a construction paper that's 12 inches by 12 inches. This gives you a nice big flower to work with and helps you to learn the process. This is not a precise tutorial where I give you exact measurements and a template to cut out. I'm just showing you kind of the idea of how these flowers get put together. That way you can experiment and have fun and create your own unique individual flowers. Step number one, to be most efficient in cutting out my paper flowers, I'm going to go ahead and fold the paper into 4 parts. I'll fold it in half and then fold it in half again. That way when I cut out one petal, I'm actually getting 4. It does not matter if you cut these on the seam or on the fold because you're going to make sure they're all individual. But I'm going to start with my biggest petal first, and it's going to take up a good half of this chunk of paper. Think of it as a loaf of bread shape. It's this shape. It's more wide than it is high, and I have a little bit of a bumpiness towards the top. After that, I'm going to cut out my medium size, which is going to take about half of the remaining paper, and it's about half the size as the first petals. And again, I'm cutting out one shape so I get 4 petals. These ones, because they're on the fold, I have to cut the fold apart so that there's 4 pieces. After that, I'm going to cut some smaller shapes. And I really want to use as much of this paper as possible. So you'll see I'm going to try to fit in as many little petals as I possibly can. Even cutting half cuts on the fold, you'll see it. I like to use every little bit. As I begin to put this flower together, I may not use every single petal that I cut out. But again, I want to have them available just in case I need them. Once I have all of my petal shapes cut out, you can see that I have used almost all the paper, but I'm not going to throw this away because I'm going to use even these little scraps for some bits and bobs later on. So I'm going to put that to the side. There's only one thing left that I need, and that is a base in which to begin attaching my petals. So for this one, I'm going to take a piece of cardstock and cut just a basic circle shape, big enough for my flower. So it's smaller than my largest petals, but still a pretty good size. To attach this all together, you can use any type of glue, but I find this tacky craft glue is so good. It dries really fast, it holds really well. If you use a glue stick, your petals might pop off after a while, and if you use a hot glue gun, you might burn your fingers, so a nice tacky glue is the best. Now we need to prep our petals, and there are 2 things that I do to prep each petal, and one is to make a center slit. So I cut from the base of the petal, I cut a small slit. How big of a cut do I make? Well, it depends on how much I want my petal to fold. So this is where you're going to just experiment. Start off with a little cut, see what your petal looks like. Move it to a bigger cut, see what it looks like. The next part of prepping these petals is to give them a little bit of shape. If you have seen the movie Frozen 2, you'll know that Olaf tells us that water has memory. Well, I'm here to tell you that paper has memory, and we're going to introduce a new memory to this paper by taking a pencil or some sort of round object and rolling it. That's going to help give our petals a little bit more of a flower shape. It curls those petals nicely. Now you don't have to do the same type of curl for each petal. Here you'll see the first petal I curl back, the second petal I curl forward, and the other 2 petals I do opposite. So I curl one forward, one back. Testing things out, trying it out, see what works best for your flower. Now that we have prepped the petals, it's time to begin to glue them into their shapes. To make this a little bit easier, I find getting some paper clips can really help. Apply a small amount of glue right next to the slit on the petal and then fold the other petal over diagonally. Using paper clips can really help hold your petals in place while you're waiting for them to dry. But again, if you use this tacky glue, it only takes just like 5 seconds of pinching it and it's got it. So I've done the first 4 big petals, and now I need to go ahead and do the same thing with all of my petals. This next tip isn't really a step, it's just a bonus idea thought that you can do, is to add a little bit of color or dimension into your petals. So for this one, I just took a marker and I began adding a couple of kind of petal lines, streaks, color inside. You could do this with, of course, markers, crayons, color pencils, paints, chalks. You don't have to have a solid color for your petal. It just adds a little bit of dimension. This isn't something that I generally do with every single paper flower that I've made in the past. I just thought I would try it out and see what it looks like, and thought I would show you guys as well so you can see if this is something you want to try out. Once we have all of our petals prepped and ready to go, they're shaped, it's time to build our flower. So I'm going to take my circle base. For the base, again, I used a harder cardstock, so it was really tough. It can hold up to the weight of the petals. I covered the top of it with a really good supply of glue, and now I'm taking my 4 largest petals and working from the outside of the circle. I'm beginning to glue them in. This is a little bit of a trial and error, but I picked up on it after a couple of flowers. I kind of figured that out. These petals are so big that I could really get away with just 3 of them, but I wanted a full rose, so I overlapped them, kind of squished them in together so that all 4 big petals would fill in that space. When you're done, it should look kind of like a flower bowl. After that's done, it's time to move on to the next round of petals, the ones that are slightly smaller. Again, I'm going to go back with the glue and apply a generous amount inside. Anytime I feel a petal isn't getting enough contact with the glue, I'll put a little extra glue on this part because I really want my flower not to fall apart. So this is the part where you use some nice amount of glue. Just remember that if you're on a surface that you don't want to get messy, you might want to put a messy mat, because as you're pushing down the petals, some of the glue might kind of go out and get on your table. It's definitely going to get on your fingers, so you get to that fun little rub your fingers together and get the glue off and pretend they're boogers kind of thing, which is what I so loved doing in elementary school. Right now I have 2 rounds of petals. I have the larger petals and now the smaller bowl of petals inside. And I'm going to just continue working on fitting my petals, working from larger petal to smaller petal as I go. Just remember, you don't have to use every single petal that you create, or if you find you need more, you can definitely stop where you are, grab some more paper, cut some more up, and continue on to make your petals fuller. I find each flower I make is a little bit different and it blooms a little bit different. Some definitely like to have more petals, some go, nah, I'm good with just a few. So don't be afraid to make them individual and unique. But I want to do something fun for the center. There's all sorts of different little things that you could stick inside there, a little pom-pom or whatever, but I want to use some of the paper that I had left over. So I'm going to cut a strip of paper to use for kind of the inside of the flower. I don't remember what that's called. If you remember what the inside of the flower is, let me know in the comment section below. I know I had to diagram a flower when I was in school and I remember writing it out, but I don't remember it now. But to make it stand out a little bit more, I'm going to take my dark purple marker and color that in so it's a little bit different color than the actual flower. And then I'm gonna do a technique that reminds me of fake eyelashes. So I'm gonna take this strip of paper and I'm going to just make tiny little cuts all the way along the side of it. Not all the way through because I don't want individual pieces of paper. I want it to be connected, but kind of make it look like grass, but for me it looks like eyelashes. I'm even going to curl some of these lashes by using a needle tool. If you don't have one, you could use a toothpick and just kind of roll the paper along it so it kind of curls it. Now I'm going to apply the glue. And again, this is why this reminds me of eyelashes. So apply the glue like you would if you were applying glue to fake eyelashes. So it's just right along that strip that you didn't cut. Don't put glue on the part that you did cut because then they'll all glue together. Then using my needle tool, or again, you can use a toothpick, I'm going to very carefully begin to roll this together. Now, this can be a little bit frustrating. Sometimes the paper just doesn't want to go. That's why I find having it on some sort of tool, like a needle tool, helps me hold on to it because I'm always trying to drop this part. But just be patient, keep rolling, and eventually you will get it. Once it's rolled the way you like it, set it aside to dry for just a few minutes. And at this point, I'm going to cut a small base for this to glue into. I decided to use one of the petals that I didn't end up using before. I colored it with my dark marker, cut a circle shape, and then again went around the whole thing so it looks a little bit like the fluffy stuff that's inside some of your flowers. Once that was done, I put a little glue on it and put it in the center of my flower. This gives it a nice base for my rolled piece to sit in there. I added some extra glue, and if my head would get out of the way, you could see me sticking the piece right in the center there. There we go, we finished our first beautiful flower. Like I said, this is not a strict, precise tutorial, but I kind of like having the freedom to make my petals look however I want them to. And again, don't be afraid to try out different types of paper, different sizes of paper. I had this really crazy print pattern and I wondered how it would look as a flower, and I loved how it turned out. It was great. To create a stem, I'm going to get some green paper straws and glue them to the top. Once they're fully dry, I'll probably use hot glue just so that they really stick. These make great decorations to hang on your wall or to decorate packages with. There are so many fun things you could do with these. If you decide to make a paper flower for yourself, make sure to share it with me on social media. I'd love to see it. And I will leave all my social media information in the description box below. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope you have more success with your paper flowers than I do with my real flowers. And as always, God bless you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll see you in the next art video. Bye-bye.